This is not just a story, it is truth. Listen closely.
Kellen, Amora said. Not a question. The old woman nodded slowly. He carries the mark of the ritual they used to try to sever him from his people. They burned it into him as children when they realized the bloodline had survived. It was meant to mark him as belonging to no one. To erase him. Amora looked at her hands. But marks can mean the opposite of what they intend, the old woman continued. His mark is not a curse. It is proof. It is evidence that Oru existed. Evidence that his line continued. The land knows this. The river knows this. The earth does not forget what people bury in it. She paused. Someone alive today ordered that mark placed on Kellen. Someone who feared what a grown man carrying Oru's blood might one day reveal. Amora looked up. Dagon's father, she said. The old woman placed her hand over Amora's and said nothing. That was enough. The village was dividing. It happened quietly at first, in the way people arranged themselves at the well, which neighbors stopped greeting each other, which children were called inside when certain adults walked past. But by the second day after the gathering, it was open. Some villagers, the younger ones mostly, and the women who had daughters and were thinking about the future, had begun to question. The boy who had spoken at the trial had been at the river every morning since and recorded the water levels in his own way, scratches in the mud of a stick he kept hidden. He had shown his records to 3 families. Those families had told 3 more. But on the other side, Dagon's people held firm. They were louder. They had more to lose: land, position, the story of the village that made them central and respected. Amora walked through the village that afternoon and felt the split like a physical thing. The air was different on different sides of it. An older woman she had known all her life pulled her aside near the market. Be careful, the woman said. Dagon is speaking to the elders today. Behind closed doors. About what? The woman looked around before she answered. He is saying Kellen must be dealt with before more people start listening. He is saying the village cannot afford doubt. Amora thanked her and walked faster. She needed to reach the forest. There was something there, something the blind woman had pointed toward but not named. The blind woman led her. She had appeared at the edge of the forest when Amora arrived, as if she had known Amora was coming. She walked into the trees without explanation, tapping her stick, moving between roots and branches with the ease of someone who had walked this path 10,000 times. Amora followed. They went deeper than Amora had ever gone, past the point where the village children dared each other to reach, past the old boundary stones worn smooth by rain and time. The forest changed as they went further. The trees grew older, taller, closer together. The light came in thin and slanted. Then the old woman stopped. She pointed her stick at the ground. Amora looked. The earth there was disturbed, not recently, but it had been disturbed and resettled and disturbed again by roots over many years. She knelt and brushed leaves aside. Beneath the surface, pushed partway into view by time and root movement, was something hard and dark. She cleared more earth with her hands. Bones. Old ones. And beside them, partially preserved by the dry subsoil, a woven cord with a carved wooden pendant, the kind village men wore as family markers. The symbol carved into it was the same as Kellen's scar. But she saw something else. Pressed into the earth near the bones. A clay seal. A mark of authority. Cracked and old and barely legible. But she knew the mark. It belonged to the village leadership. To Dagon's family. By the time Amora returned to the village, everything was already in motion. The elders had reconvened in the square. Dagon stood at the center. His voice when she arrived was not the measured, patient voice from before. There was an edge in it now, urgency pressed thin beneath the surface, like water behind a cracking dam. We have waited long enough, he was saying. Every day of delay is another day the land suffers. Every day we allow doubt to grow, we weaken ourselves. He turned as Amora entered the square, and his eyes found her immediately. The outsider must be dealt with today, he said. Before sunset. Murmurs through the crowd. The uncertain ones, those who had started to question, looked at each other. But they were afraid. Dagon still held the weight of the chief's name. His father was old and barely left his house anymore, but his name was still architecture. It held things up. Amora walked to the center of the square. She was aware of every eye on her. She was aware of Kellen standing to one side, watching her with that steady, patient look she had come to know, the look that said, "Whatever you decide, I trust you." She reached into the cloth at her waist and removed the carved pendant she had taken from the forest. She held it up where the entire gathering could see it. "Before anyone is dealt with," she said clearly, "I have something that belongs to this village." Silence. Then the crowd surged forward, not violently, but with the irresistible pull of people who need to see something their minds have not yet accepted. Amora kept the pendant raised. I found this in the forest, she said. Buried. With bones. With remains that the earth has been holding for 40 years. She looked directly at the elders. The man those bones belonged to had this mark. The same mark that was cut into my husband's arm, not as a curse. As ownership. As erasure. Someone marked a child to make him into nothing, so that no one would believe him when he grew up and started asking questions. She turned to the crowd. The river did not drop because a stranger came to this village. The river dropped because the earth does not rest when injustice sits in it. When truth is buried, the land knows. Dagon stepped forward. His voice was very controlled now. This woman is telling a story, he said. A story she has invented to protect a man who has brought suffering to your families. Then explain the seal, Amora said. She held it out toward the elders. This clay seal was buried with those bones. Read it. One elder leaned forward. His face changed as he looked. The color left it slowly, like water leaving cloth. He sat back without speaking. The crowd watched him, and his silence said everything. One of the oldest elders rose from his stool. He was not one of Dagon's men. He was older than all of them, a man who had sat in councils for so long that the carved wood of his stool had shaped itself around him. His name was Obil, and people said he had been present at the founding ceremonies of 3 different community halls. He stood slowly, leaning on his staff, and turned to face the crowd. I will speak, he said. Dagon turned immediately. Elder, there is no need. I will speak. Obil's voice was not loud, but it stopped Dagon completely. He waited until the square was fully quiet. I was a young man when it happened, he said. I was not yet on the council. But I knew. Many of us knew, in the way that people know things that are too dangerous to say out loud. He looked at the pendant in Amora's hand. Ori was a real man. He farmed at the lower river bend, the land that now belongs to the chief's household. When he refused to give it up, the council of that time made a decision. I am ashamed to say I did not oppose it. I told myself I was too young, too powerless. He paused. I have told myself that for 40 years. He looked at Dagon. His father led it. Dagon's jaw tightened. My father is old and sick, Anne. His father led it, Obil repeated. And the child they tried to erase is standing in this square today. Dagon did not break immediately. He was his father's son, and his father had taught him that composure was the most powerful tool a man in authority could hold. So he stood straight and kept his face arranged and spoke in a voice that was almost, steady. One old man's memory does not overturn a village's judgment, he said. It does not have to, the blind woman said. She had appeared again at the edge of the square. None of them had seen her enter. She walked to the center with her stick and stood beside Amora. The seal is real, she said. The bones are real. The mark on that man's arm is real. She pointed toward Kellen, then turned her sightless eyes toward Dagon. And you have known since the day you saw his scar in the market, 2 seasons ago. You knew who he was the moment you saw it. That is why you wanted the land leader's daughter for yourself, to build another wall of power around a secret that was already crumbling. The crowd was very still. That is why when Amora chose him, you did not feel rejected. You felt exposed. Something crossed Dagon's face. Something he could not control. It was there for less than a breath. But the crowd saw it. When a crowd of people see the truth in a powerful man's face, all at once, it is like watching a very tall tree realize it has no more roots. The falling takes only a moment. Kellen walked to the center of the square. He had not spoken during the entire trial. He had stood and watched and waited with that great stillness of his, the stillness that people had read as guilt, and that was, Amora now understood completely, something else. It was grief. The grief of a man who had carried something heavy for his entire life and had finally reached the place where he could set it down. He faced the crowd. I did not come to Amora for revenge, he said. His voice was quiet, but the square was so silent that every word reached every corner. I came because the road brought me here. Because blood finds its way home even when it does not know the name of the place it is looking for. He turned his arm so the scar faced outward. This mark was given to me when I was 6 years old. Men came in the night and held me down and burned it into my skin. I was told it meant I belonged to no one. That I was nothing. That I had no people. He paused. I believed them for a long time. He looked at Amora. Then someone looked at me the way I had forgotten people could look at each other. And I followed that feeling here. To the place I was taken from. He looked up at the sky again, that gesture Amora recognized now. He was not asking the sky for anything. He was thanking it. What happened next, Amora would describe years later as the moment the village chose what it wanted to become. The spirits, if that is what they were, the presences that had walked around the hut at night, that had called Dagon's name in the wind, did not appear visibly. There was no fire, no shaking of the earth, no dramatic collapse of buildings. But the forest behind the square began to sound. A deep, steady sound. Not threatening, not joyful, simply present, the way the earth sounds when you press your ear against it and listen, a hum of old, patient life. And in that moment, every elder in the square stood. Not on command, not because someone signaled them. They stood, one by one, and turned their backs on Dagon. It is an old gesture in that part of the world. It does not require words. It is the community's way of removing authority from a man, of saying, you no longer speak for us. Dagon looked at them. He looked at the crowd. He looked at Amora, and finally the composure cracked, not into rage, but into something smaller, sadder. The face underneath was not a villain's face. It was the face of a man who had inherited a wrong and chosen to protect it instead of end it. He said nothing. He turned and walked out of the square, and the crowd let him go, which was its own kind of judgment. 3 days later, the river rose. Not all at once, not like a sudden miracle. Slowly, the way truth usually works. A little more water each morning, the banks filling gradually, the fishing boats lifting off the mud and floating properly again. By the end of the week, the river was full. The crops did not all recover. Some things lost stay lost. But new planting began, and the soil, people said, felt different, looser, more willing. Elder Obeil, with the agreement of the council, formally recognized Kellen as a son of Amora. The land at the lower river bend, Oru's land, was returned. Dagon's father was too old and sick to face a full council, but the truth was recorded, written into the village memory where it would stay. Amora's mother came to their hut one evening near sunset. She brought yams and palm oil and a calabash of water. She sat at the low table and did not apologize with words. She simply put her hand over Amora's and sat with her in silence for a long time. Some things are said better that way. The blind woman was not seen again after the day of the final gathering. Some people said she had never really existed, that she was something the forest sent when the time was right. Amora did not argue with them either way. She knew what she had seen. Kellen planted along the river that first season. Amora worked beside him. Their feet were wet with good earth and the sound of water moving properly again was all around them. Tell me, the question at the end of their story goes, the one that spread from mouth to mouth across villages until it became the kind of question people ask at night, when the fire is low and everyone is thinking. How often do we laugh at what we do not understand? The end.
If you love African stories, hit subscribe, like this video, share with friends, and tell us your thoughts in the comments. We want to serve you better.